President Donald Trump making his first court appearance in a case surrounding the 2020 presidential election, this time at a federal courthouse in our nation's capital.
There have been several developments today. Atlanta News first anchor and attorney Joy Lim-Nakrin has been monitoring this for us. So, Joy, what is the latest in all this?
All right. Well, the latest is that the president has now former president has now entered a plea of not guilty to these federal charges. This is the third indictment against him. We're talking about 4 felony counts against him, which are conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, as well as conspiracy against rights. Any day now as well, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis could also announce charges against the former president in connection to alleged interference in the 2020 election, which would potentially be a 4th indictment. And the alleged activity also serves as part of the basis for the federal indictments out of our nation's capital today. So legal observers that we spoke with say this federal indictment today indicates a very strong likelihood of an indictment right here in Georgia. And one of those legal observers includes a local attorney, J. Edward Shipp.
It's very probable that District Attorney Willis will use some of this indictment or use some of the facts gleaned from this indictment in her prosecution of Donald Trump.
And the former president is also facing criminal charges of falsifying business records in New York, as well as 40 federal counts in Florida for allegedly mishandling classified documents there as well. Alan.
This is going to come